Thanks so much, John, for that wonderful introduction, and Nancy as well, and to all of the Rotary Club here. I know that Rotarians have been tremendous supporters of the work of Harvest Manitoba, and then going back decades. In our former name as Winnipeg Harvest, the Rotary Club of Winnipeg has just been such a supporter of so many important initiatives all over the city for a very, very long time. So I just want to say a big thank you right off the bat to all of you for the work that you do in the community, both through the Rotary Club and through your own personal world and businesses, and for having me here today. When we got this talk initially set up, the intention was really for me to talk a little bit about COVID-19 and how that issue has really struck Harvest, and how we've had to adapt and change in the face of Harvest Manitoba. So I intend to do that, talk a little bit about some other developments that we've had happening here over the past almost 2 years now that we've been in this pandemic situation, and where we're going from here. So when the pandemic started in March of 2020, COVID-19 was really a perfect storm for what was still then Winnipeg Harvest and what is today Harvest Manitoba. We saw our usage numbers jump by about 30%, really just about overnight. And as many of you will recall, those early weeks of the pandemic, this was before all of the various government support programs like CERB had come on stream. People were being laid off, people were out of school, there was tremendous economic uncertainty. So we had people coming to Harvest who had never needed our services before, and we were fielding, at certain peak times, over 100 calls a day at Harvest, new hamper clients calling to get food support, which for us really was completely unprecedented. So that was the first part of the perfect storm, was the increase of demand. The second part of that perfect storm was that because of the public health restrictions that were in place, we had to send many of our volunteers home, almost all of our volunteers home. Volunteers, as you may know, for any of you that have been at Harvest, I know some of you here in the Rotary Club do volunteer and have volunteered at Harvest. We had to send many people back home. We rely on hundreds of thousands of hours of volunteer labor every year to pack the hampers, sort the food, drive the trucks, do the other activities that let Harvest run. So that disruption to our operation was a huge, huge challenge in those early months of the pandemic. As well, we saw donations of food drop by as much as 80%. In some of those early weeks of the pandemic, as people were going to their grocery store and they were stocking up on cans of soup and toilet paper and everything under the sun as they got ready for the pandemic. So it was really a perfect storm. 30% increase in usage, 80% reduction in food donations, and the volunteers are sent home. So we were really at a point in those days of 2020, in the early part of the pandemic, where Harvest was at the point where it almost had to close its doors for the first time in its history, the first time in the 35-year history of the organization. We were really at the brink because of that perfect storm situation. And it's terrible to think that we came so close to that fate at a time when our community had never really needed us as much as they did at that time. It was really only because of the support of some very generous individuals, organizations, that we were able to sustain the operation. And just a few organizations that deserve some particular thanks. The City of Winnipeg, who were looking to furlough many city employees from libraries and community centers and other facilities, said to those employees, look, if you come to Winnipeg Harvest and volunteer your time, we'll continue to pay your wages. That was a huge help for Harvest. And then organizations that stepped up with money, groups like the Winnipeg Jets players, not even just the team, although we continue to get support from True North and the Winnipeg Jets organization. The Winnipeg Jets players passed the hat around the locker room and raised $100,000 in cash to support Harvest. So that was money that we desperately needed because of the supply chain challenges and disruptions to donations. We were having to go out and buy food for our hampers, really for the first time that we'd ever had to do it in anything like the magnitude that we had to do it during the pandemic. Again, typically 80% plus of our food is donated here at Harvest through our bin programs and otherwise. So to have to go out and buy it was a huge hit for us. So again, a big thanks to those organizations and to really thousands and thousands of Manitobans who stepped up with financial cash contributions that allowed us to get through that. And of course, when a crisis like COVID hits, I think we all know that it is those individuals in our communities that have the least that tend to be hurt the most. And that's what we saw all throughout the pandemic, whether that was seniors living on fixed incomes, whether that was individuals with chronic health challenges or disabilities, people that live alone and live in isolated circumstances, people that suffer from challenges of mental health and challenges of addiction. These are many of the individuals that we help at Harvest. These are some of the 80,000 people a month that are helped through our food programs. And for them, COVID and the isolation of it and the economic dislocation, supply chain difficulties were a huge, huge challenge. So, now we're 18 months plus into this pandemic, and we have learned a lot of lessons at Harvest during that period of time. We have brought into effect a full vaccination policy for our staff and volunteers for accessing our warehouse. We needed to do that to make sure that we were being as safe as we could be and in as much compliance as we could with the public health mandates and recommendations that are out there. I'm so pleased to say that our staff became 100% compliant. All of our staff who perhaps were not vaccinated yet or not fully vaccinated agreed to do so. All the volunteers coming into our warehouse now are fully vaccinated. And the decision that we took there was that the risk to us was just too great. When you have 80,000 people a month who are relying on that food that comes through our warehouse, if we were to get struck with an outbreak of COVID-19 that would have the potential to shut us down, it's just simply a risk too great. We simply could not tolerate that level of risk. So we're moving forward in a good way. We've learned many lessons from COVID. There are many more lessons that we are going to continue to learn, as we all do, and adapt to this new normal. But again, just a big thanks to Manitobans for being so generous. Another theme I want to touch on from the past year has been our change of name. So many of people still call us Winnipeg Harvest, and we were Winnipeg Harvest for 35 years. In 2020, last year, we changed our name to Harvest Manitoba. And that name change was really, more than anything else, the product of a sort of a slow and steady evolution of Winnipeg Harvest serving more and more communities outside of the city. We provide hampers and food to Samaritan House in Brandon. In fact, we just sent out a semi-trailer full of hampers, about 900 hampers, out to Brandon yesterday, and we do that on a monthly basis. Dauphin, Thompson, the Paw, all over central and eastern Manitoba, up into the Interlake. We're getting ready now to ship food and work with our First Nations partners in remote fly-in First Nations to get them food this winter as well. So it's really been a slow evolution from Winnipeg Harvest to Harvest Manitoba, and in 2020 we made the formal change of name There was another organization in Manitoba called the Manitoba Association of Food Banks that represented all of the various food banking agencies across the province. That organization merged with then Winnipeg Harvest and created this new corporate entity of Harvest Manitoba. So my view is that the name better reflects who we are and better reflects that we are in every corner of the province. And important to recognize, of course, as well, that here in Winnipeg, we operate on Treaty 1 territory, and we support First Nations in all of the 5 treaty areas that that cover the province of Manitoba, and that are the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, the Cree, the OG Cree, the Dene, and of course the homeland of the Métis Nation. And it's important for Harvest to recognize the connections that we have to the treaties and the responsibilities that collectively we have to one another. We just issued a report called Harvest Voices 2 weeks ago, where we told stories from people that use the services of Harvest. The first time we'd really undertaken a study of that kind of our client base. 36% of people that we serve at Harvest are Indigenous people. So it certainly a factor which is more than twice the percentage of Indigenous people in the population. So overly represented in the client base of Harvest Manitoba. And of course, one statistic that we often talk about as well is that 1 in 8 Manitobans lives with some form of food insecurity. Many of them are children, and of course those rates are even higher when you get into some of our inner city neighborhoods here in Winnipeg, when you talk about First Nations communities, particularly in the north, where the affordability and availability of fresh food, fresh produce, fruits, vegetables is very limited, and you end up with huge problems like child malnutrition and chronic health problems like type 2 diabetes, which is 3 times as prevalent in First Nations communities in Canada than it is in the general population. And at the end of the day, these are challenges of nutrition. They're challenges of food and food insecurity. So Harvest is playing a role all across the province and working, as you mentioned, John, to that goal, which is working toward a healthier future where no Manitoban goes hungry. So although we've changed our name from Winnipeg Harvest to Harvest Manitoba, the mission that we have here continues to be the same. And it's really in 3 parts. The first is that Harvest feeds. And as I mentioned, there are 80,000 plus individuals in Manitoba that are supported by Harvest, either through our hamper program, which is currently operating at record levels of need, whether that's through the food that we provide to soup kitchens and missions that are in the city and elsewhere, whether that's meal and snack programs, whether that's programs that we run in schools and daycares. So there's a lot of people that are supported, and again, half of them children. So feeding people is a huge part of it, but it's not just about hampers. It's about hope, and it's about giving people choice in their life, making it so that parents don't have to make some of the terrible choices between putting nutritious food on the table or buying school supplies for their kids, or that a senior on a fixed income doesn't have to make a choice between medicine that they may need and putting food on the table, or that people who are facing some sort of emergency or crisis in their life, job loss or other challenges, are able to get back on their feet. So that's a huge part of what we do, obviously, and what we're known most for is that we feed people. But we also empower people. And we've done that traditionally through many of our training programs that we've operated. Some of them we've had to suspend, unfortunately, during COVID, although in the new year, we're looking to bring those back. Everything from training people in our warehouse on customer service in our call center, to food safe and kitchen skills and food handling skills, to our warehouse training programs, safety, inventory, forklift operations, various sorts of training programs. And typically, we would have trained about 50 people a year would have come through this facility and received training of various kinds. And many of them would have gone on to find employment in the community. And many of them actually have found employment here at Harvest Manitoba, which is wonderful. And there are many stories of individuals here at Harvest who started their journey with us needing food aid in a time of need. And they may have spent some time volunteering with us as a way to give back and say thank you for the food they received. And that volunteering may have turned into employment. So that's a wonderful story as well. And it's helping people build confidence and gain financial security and independence. So that empowerment piece is a really critical piece of what we do. And the third piece of that mission is around our advocacy and education. And there are many spokes in this wheel. One of the more important ones, we work with the Max Rady College of Medicine and with the doctors that are coming through medical school so that they better understand the relationship between food insecurity and health. And we bring them to Harvest, they see what's going on, and they learn about how they can, when they're speaking with their patients, help identify when the answer to a problem might not necessarily be a prescription for pills, but it might be a phone number for Harvest Manitoba, and that what people might actually need is access to a reliable supply of healthy, nutritious food in their life. So we work with the College of Medicine around that. We also work again before COVID, but we're going to bring it back this coming year. We hope thousands of school children every year who come to visit us at Harvest, see what we do. We have many of the leadership groups at the high schools come and help volunteer here at Harvest. We just had a group in from Daniel Mack, who's done some incredible work with us. Students learn about nutrition, they learn about community gardening, they learn about poverty in our community, learn about food insecurity. And I think importantly, teaching young people that it's okay to ask for help when we need it, and that it is not something that we should judge others for when they need help, and that we should reserve that judgment, and that it is a privilege of those in this community who are able to give, to do so, and to help those who have less. And that's how we build a better and stronger community. So those are important lessons that we teach at Harvest to educate that next generation of people. So again, that gives you in a nutshell what Harvest continues to be about. But of course, the foundation for so much of that is food. This year, we'll probably see about 12 million pounds of food go through our facilities here on Winnipeg Avenue. If you haven't been here and you're interested to come and spend a shift with us volunteering, be very happy to have you do it. We do need those volunteers, and we've been welcoming more and more of them back into the facility. We rely so much as well on the support of our agricultural producers. Groups like the Dairy Farmers of Manitoba last year donated over 300,000 liters of milk. Groups like Peak of the Market that bring us potatoes and carrots and onions that we're able to get out to our families as well. So it's a real community effort that supports Harvest Manitoba. It takes a community to feed a community, and that's really been the ethos that we've operated under for now these past 36 years. And I think that so many of the organizations, the donors, the volunteers who keep coming back and back and back again to Harvest, they do it because it makes them feel good. And I've seen this in my just few months at Harvest, and I saw this during my time at St. Boniface, and I've seen this in so many walks of life, that people never feel as strong as they do when they're lifting somebody else up. You're never going to feel stronger than when you're helping someone up. And so people get that strength from their work at Harvest. And if any of you are looking to insert that into your life and have an opportunity to get that new experience and to work in a hands-on way, very much encourage you to come and join our efforts here at Harvest. So with that, Nancy, perhaps I'll end it there. Be happy to answer any questions that that anybody may have.